Good morning, friends, and welcome to today's Tanya study. We're starting a new chapter, chapter 4 of Tanya. I was at an event this week down in South Florida. Some guy comes over to me and he shows me his phone with a picture of my face on it. I'm like, what am I doing on your phone? He says, you're this guy. He says he learns Tanya with me every day. I never met him before, but he learns Tanya with me every day because he searched Tanya on the internet, on YouTube. And I guess there's not that much Tanya being taught out there. So another guy in California told me the same thing the other day, which is great. And it's an honor to be able to teach Tanya on a global scale. So folks, the live audience, I actually asked the people, I said, does the live audience, how do you feel about the live audience? So just remember that there's, we're doing this for posterity. We're keeping these Tanya classes here, God willing, forever until Mashiach comes. So your input is always part of that. All right, let's do this. We're starting a new chapter today, a chapter which is so incredibly personal. It's so empowering to realize what we're getting into in chapter 4, because if you thought that chapter 3 was personal, chapter 4 gets even more granular. Let me explain. A quick helicopter view on where we're standing in Tanya. We started chapter 1. The whole Tanya, remember, is about the book of you. It's about you. It's not the book of who you can become or who you were. It's the book of you, where you are. That's what Tanya is about, right? Now we said chapter 1 talks about the fact that there's not one but two souls within you. It's claustrophobic. There's two of you. Get used to it, all right? You got to make peace with your two souls. You got an animal soul. It's a natural soul. It's not bad. It's just self-centered. Nothing evil about that. Nothing sinister. It's just self-serving. In addition to your self-centered soul, your animal soul, your natural soul, you also have, Jews have, a godly soul. That godly soul is the opposite of the natural soul in its ambition, in its direction, because as opposed to being self-serving, it is purpose-oriented. It is purpose-oriented. What does it mean to be purpose-oriented? It doesn't do what it wants to do. It does what needs to be done. It asks not what God can do for it. It asks what it can do for God. And that's a big difference. Now that you know that you have two souls within you, okay, so what are we supposed to do about that? Chapter 3 came to tell us the makeup, the spiritual makeup of each of those two souls. They're made up of intellect and emotions, of 3 intellectual attributes and 7 emotional attributes. We learned what those emotions are, what those intellectual attributes are. That was the content of chapter 3, And there we learned the incredibly powerful tools of our 3 intellectual attributes. Chachma, bina, das, idea, understanding, and feeling. We learned how to employ, solicit, and engage each of those 3 intellectual faculties. Now, I believe that it's attributed to Einstein, who said something about most people using only a very small percentage of their brain power, maybe 5 or 8% of their brain power. Yeah, look, I guess it depends who's talking. I guess it depends who you're talking about. But the idea here is that I want to share with you is that within the context of Tanya, of chapter 3, understanding that your brain involves idea, understanding, which is horizontal thinking, and feeling, which is vertical thinking, as we discussed. Most people don't get to stage 3, to third base. They're so stuck on first and second base. Most people aren't even stuck on first base because they're just responding to all the data that's being force-fed down their throats. There's very little creative thinking going on. In a world of instant formula, instant gratification, instant text messaging, and instant websites uploading, it's very little creative thinking that people need to actually engage with. What would you rather do? Spend an hour thinking or spend an hour watching Netflix? It's just so much easier to just be a consumer. But if you're aware of the 3 intellectual processes, the 3 intellectual stages, and you actually choose to employ them, I think you're using a lot more than your 5 to 8% that was.
What are the 3 again, please?
In summary, Chachma, Bina, Das, they make up the acronym of Chabad, and they are: idea is the first one. It's solicited by a question mark, having the humility to ask a question. Then you get a brain surge from a gift from God. That's where ideas come from. It's divinely inspired. That's idea. Then comes the next step, which is after horizontal thinking. You flesh out the idea, stretch it out. That leads you to understanding. That's Bina, understanding. And finally, you reach the third step, which is Das, feeling in your heart what you've already understood in your mind. And that is accomplished not by horizontal thinking, but by vertical thinking, by focused thought on something you already understand, also known as meditating. Because when you meditate on something which you already understand, you'll notice that very quickly you'll start feeling something. And if you have the maturity to maintain the meditation without leaping out of your seat, you're going to formulate a much more solid and permanent emotion. That was the theme at the very end of chapter 3 that spoke about fleeting emotions versus permanent ones, all depending upon the length, duration, and intensity of the focused meditation. But now in chapter 4, we're taking it even more personally. Because in chapter 4, we're going to learn that what we learned already in chapter 3, that you can't change your emotions. You can only guide them. You can only steer them or influence them. What you can change is your intellect. You can choose what to think about. And we said in chapter 3, you can only think about one thing at a time. You can only think about one thing at a time. So you are the master of your thoughts. You can choose what you want to think about, and you can choose what you don't want to think about. You do not need to let every depraved thought from today's media feed into your mind. You don't need to do that. You don't have to know every single stupidity that came out of the mouth of every single celebrity in the past 24 hours. It's just not necessary information, right? If you want to, that's what you're going to start feeling. But we're taking that further in chapter 4 as we differentiate with body and clothing. I'm going to explain this in a few moments. But let's talk about body and clothing. What's more important, your body or your clothes? I'm really sorry, but you're very wrong. Obviously, it sounds like you're obviously correct, obviously. Body is much more important than clothing, right? But where do people spend more attention, on their body or on their clothing?
Hopefully body. Hopefully body.
How often would you see somebody walking around with schmutz on their clothing? And how often do you have schmutz on your clothing? Like a coffee stain. Versus how many times a day do you eat schmutz?
That's a good question.
Do you see what I'm saying? You probably eat schmutz 20 times more in a day, and I'm being kind, right? Compared to the amount of times that you have schmutz on your clothing. You would never be caught dead with a coffee stain on your shirt. But would you eat something loaded with sugar? Would you drink a Diet Pepsi Coke? Sorry, you order the what do they say? How does it go? You order the double burger, right? With extra
Big
fries.
Mac.
The Big Mac, right? But you get a Diet Pepsi, right? As if that's gonna save, right? As if that's gonna help you, right?
Yeah.
You just killed yourself with all that oil, right? And the Diet Pepsi is gonna save you, right? The Diet Pepsi is filled with garbage too.
Yeah.
Personally, I can't even put that stuff in my mouth. I don't drink any soda drinks like that. But think about how much garbage we put inside of our bodies versus how much garbage we wear. We don't wear garbage. We just don't do that. But eating garbage, why do we do that? Why? Why is that? Was somebody going to say something? I'm sorry, I was a little thought.
No, I'll just say
Yeah.
something. I wasn't going to say anything about garbage. Look, use me for an example.
Okay.
This is not created with garbage.
What is not created? You're not garbage?
Good stuff.
It's all muscle.
Not garbage. No Big Mac.
Disclaimer.
No, just the good stuff. So
Do you only eat healthy food?
only?
Yeah.
Not-
You only eat healthy
Well,
food?
what's considered healthy?
You know what's healthy, okay? Do you only eat healthy food, yes or no?
80% of the time.
Okay, so 20% you eat garbage. Okay, that's my point. That's exactly my point. Do you wear 20% garbage? No. You wear 0% garbage. You always look like $1 million for it. You know that. Right? Because we are more careful. We as human beings care more about our clothing than we care about our bodies. When somebody walks into a room, how do you judge them? Do you judge a book by its cover?
Absolutely.
Hell yeah. We all do.
I try not to, but yeah.
Yeah, we'd like to think that we don't. But we,
Well,
of course, we-
sometimes how you look is a reflection
Who you are.
of who you are, who you
Very true.
want to be thought
how
of.
we look is a reflection of who we
Sure.
are.
That can be true.
I
It can
hope-
very- and it can be very not true.
Really do.
It's a way in which we express who we would like people, how we want people to, who we think we are, or how we want people
Who
to,
we would like.
how we want people to perceive us.
Precisely. And how, my kids have a stash of Purim costumes, hundreds of different, collected through the ages. And they love dressing up as little policemen and firemen and ballerinas and Ninja Turtles and God knows what else, right? Why do kids like to do that? Do you know why they like to dress up?
Make believe.
It's not make-believe. For them, it's real. When a kid dresses up like a cop,
That's true, you're right.
they feel like a cop. And when they
dress like a little princess,
They
are
feel they're not just
princesses.
making for you. It's make believe. For them, it's
When I
real,
do it, when I put on my uniform, I always all make believe.
right?
That's why Disney World is so great, because when they go, they think those characters are real.
And guess what happens when you watch a movie?
Yeah.
You know that he doesn't really love her, right? You know there's 14 cameras around that set, and it's not even a real living room, okay? But you're still crying tears.
Right.
Why? Because we judge a book by its cover. Because we human beings just are superficial, and there's nothing you can do about it. Why are we so superficial? We learned about this in chapter 1. Because our animal soul is rooted in an energy called klipa. Klipa, which means peels. 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 It's divine superficiality. There's nothing wrong with superficiality. We come from God's superficial energy. That's our animal soul. Our godly soul comes from God's essence. We learned that in chapter 2. But our animal soul is rooted in God's superficiality, which is why our animal soul desires superficial stuff. The animal soul doesn't care about what the goal is. He wants to know what feels good. Right?
It's true.
He's not focused on the purpose, he's focused on the pleasure. That's what your animal soul wants to do. Not by
Part of you.
Yeah, so it's not evil. It's just who you are. That's how God created you. Now, we'll learn later in Tanya that the goal of our self-mastery is to allow the godly soul to dominate over the animal soul, to allow the purpose to dominate over the pleasure, to do what's needed from you, not what you want to do, right? Because God set us up for this cosmic tug of war. That's part of what it means to be human. That's part of the excitement of life, where we have self-determination and the ability to make your own choices. This is where reward and punishment comes into the picture, because you have a true battle raging within you. But you need to know who the players are if you're going to experience any sense of victory. If you don't know who the enemy is, how are you going to win? I'm not sure if I'm fighting the Navy or the Air Force, then that's not good. You need to study your enemy, right?
Does the Tanya go into, when you keep saying sort of the intellect and the two souls and so forth, there are people who are more intelligent than others and can decipher it better. Does it go into that?
Of course, everybody's given them the intellectual capacity that they need for their personal mission upon this earth.
Because I mean, it's easier for some than it is for others.
What
because
is
they're more
easier?
disciplined
What's easier?
to decipher
In
the
chapter
two
29,
souls.
the Tanya gets into exactly that point. Don't judge yourself by someone else. They have a different purpose on this earth. You've got exactly the tools that you need, and they have the tools that they need. If you're jealous or envious of someone else, you're effectively an idolater because you believe that things are important, and you don't believe that things are merely tools given to you by the master of the universe to fulfill your purpose. So instead of experiencing envy, jealousy, be grateful for what you have. Who is wealthy? He who is satisfied with his lot, right? If we're going to fulfill our personal mission upon this earth, you've got the tools that you need. You don't need to be an Einstein or a Lubavitcher Rebbe. You need to be you. That's all.
I've never heard it stated that it's idolatry. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And
There's
it
only one
makes
power in the
actually
universe.
Quite a bit of sense.
Yeah. There's a major theme in Tanya. So let's develop this theme on garments. Yeah. Let's develop this theme in Tanya, which states as follows. Wasn't something I said. Good.
We don't clothe our body. Clothes on the shul.
We do clothe our bodies.
Very good.
No,
I would hope that we clothe our bodies.
I guess in Florida, it's nice.
Okay.
I
So
think he's being metaphorical.
yeah, he's being meditative. But I think it's important to remember that we very much do clothe our bodies because it's from the metaphor that you're able to understand the analog. If you reject the metaphor, you won't understand the analog, right? Well, a special welcome to all of our online viewers. Those live and those later. Remember, you can always email me, rabbi@jewishgardens.com with your questions, comments, critique, and criticism. That's rabbi@jewishgardens.com. So let's talk about these garments. The thing about garments, number one, we said that they're superficial, right? They are external to our bodies. You would think that they're less important than our bodies. But what we know is that clothing maketh the man. I'm curious to know who makes more money, the medical industry or the clothing industry? That's an interesting question.
Pharmaceuticals are very expensive.
Yeah, pharmaceuticals, the health insurance probably making more than everybody, right? But I wonder who, that's interesting. But clothing is a major industry, right? So why is that? Because clothing actually is more important to our animal soul than our bodies, because the animal soul cares more about the perception than about the purpose. And we all know around this table, we all know that we care more about, what do they say? Perception is 90% of reality, right? Right? We all know that. It's a fact. As embarrassed as we are to admit it, it's the fact, right? So this is why the Rebbe teaches us that instead of looking at this as a weakness, now this is not the Alter Rebbe, this is the Rebbe teaches us this. Instead of looking at our superficiality as a weakness, look at it as a strength. Don't say, oh, I'm so shallow that I'm superficial, that I care more about my perception than I care about my purpose. Look at it as a strength. It says like that. And this is how where Tanya chapter 4 fits in. If you learn to wear the right garments, you will begin to feel the way you should feel. Remember, like the kid dresses like a cop, feels like a cop? When I wake up in the morning and I dress like $1 million, I feel like $1 million. But when I dress in the morning and I dress for the beach, you know what I feel like? I feel like I'm going to the beach. That's what I feel like. I don't feel like successful. Do you know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about. When you dress to the nines when you go to the wedding versus when you don't dress to the nines, right? What?
So you said if you learn to wear the right garments.
If you learn to wear the right garments, you as superficial beings, because of the emphasis that we place on our perception, our inner feeling follows our external perception. So instead of our inner feeling follows our external perception.
That's right. The idea.
You agree to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's.
The way you look is the way you feel.
The way you look is the way you feel. Exactly. So let's game the system now. Is what the Rebbe teaches us. He says, you want to be a mensch? Dress like a mensch. What does it mean to dress like a mensch?
I forget it.
I'll get to that in a minute. I'll get to that in a minute.
Can we just sidebar on that? I'm sorry, what? Talking about clothes, but what about makeup and things like that?
Same
Women
thing. Wake up is exactly the same thing. It's all superficial.
use jewelry. But women, we want women to,
Yes, of course. You want women to look beautiful,
right?
and men should look decent. 100%. You know, there's this a mitzvah that women are supposed to cover their hair when they're married, right? So many groups of observant Jews believe that they should the woman should cover their hair with a handkerchief, or like, the kerchief, the tichel, it's called. Some groups even go as far as shaving off the woman's hair, and that's pretty extreme. But the Rebbe was very into the wig.
Yeah, like I know
The woman-
Sephardics, they don't put wigs on. do
Right.
they?
So the Rebbe was very much encouraging women to wear wigs, and the Rebbe was harshly criticized. The wigs make them look more beautiful, not less beautiful.
They are gorgeous.
And the Rebbe said, that's precisely the point. They're supposed to look beautiful. Our goal is not to make the woman look less beautiful, as if beauty is some sort of a divine sin. No. This is my God, and I shall glorify him. You're supposed to live a life of prosperity and wealth and happiness and health, and you're supposed to look like $1,000,000. In fact, when God has given you all this bounty and you walk around like a pauper, complaining, kvetching, that's, Rashi tells us soon in Chumash, that's actually an affront to God. Right? Imagine your parents give you everything, and then you still walk around complaining they don't give you enough. It's not nice. You're supposed to look like $1,000,000 and feel like $1,000,000 and talk like it, because God has given you all this blessing, right? So it's very interesting. The Rebbe was very into women looking very, very beautiful. Now, let me just complete this thought here. So by gaming the system, it means like this: that if you want to become a mensch, how do you become a mensch? Look like a mensch, dress like a mensch. What does it mean to dress like a mensch, to look like a mensch? This is where Tanya chapter 4 comes in, and it tells us that there's such a thing called the garments of the soul. Until now, we've been talking about the garments of the body. But now begins this new concept, the garments of the soul. They work exactly in the same way as the garments of the body. That how you dress on the outside is how you feel on the inside. And we'll learn later in chapter 4 that they actually are more holy. Our garments are more holy than our actual soul. Mirroring that truth that I mentioned earlier, that we care more about our garments than we care about our soul. It's a very fascinating concept. We can experience divine communion through the garments of our soul, whilst our soul itself cannot.
I would think if our garments are more holy, we need to change our garments.
That's exactly the point.
Can you give an example of the draw distinction between garments of the soul and garments of the animal? What would be a garment
Of the body. Let's talk
Of the
about
body.
it. So garments of the body is shirts, pants, ties, suits, lipstick, hats, all that stuff, wigs. Whatever you wear is garments of the body.
Right.
Garments of the soul are 3. There's only 3 garments of the soul. They are how the soul expresses itself. Just like the body, you want to walk around naked because to express yourself and interact with the world, you have to wear something. There are only 3 garments of the soul through which the soul expresses itself to the world around it. Without these garments, the soul is just like unable to communicate with anybody else. It can't, like a naked person can't come out. And those 3 garments are thought, speech, action. Those are the 3 modes of the soul's expression. They are the garments, the clothing of the soul through which the soul expresses itself. Thought, speech, and action. You can only think about one thing at a time. You can only speak about one thing at a time. And you can only do one thing at a time. Now remember, you've got 2 souls within you, right? But you only have one thought, one speech, and one action at a time. So what just happened was a bottleneck. What just happened was a bottleneck. You had 2 souls fighting. We're going to learn about this in chapter 9. But 2 souls fighting within you. They're struggling, they're grappling, they're wrestling. But every moment, one of those souls will declare victory.
Which you can do.
Let me just finish. Hold on. Every moment, one of those souls will declare victory. What does that mean? In your next thought, your next word, and your next action. Your next thought, word, and action will either express the animal soul or express the godly soul. It's one or the other. It can never be both. What did you say, Warren?
You can do both two things at one time.
You can or cannot?
Can.
Tell me, which both are you able to do at the same time?
You can speak on the phone while you making a batter for a cake.
Okay, so I'm saying one
Physically,
thought at a time, one word at a time, one speech at a time. I'm saying not two thoughts, not you can they can be
physically.
yeah, physically, of course you can do physically. Right, of course.
You can-
By the way, generally speaking, something which generation struggles with, if you want to be thoughtful in your actions, we're so busy multitasking that we're not thinking about anything. We're doing 16 things at the same time. Multitasking was made for computers, not for human beings. So if you want to be mindful, considerate, conscious of your thought, speech, and action, you may want to do one thing at a time. It's quite a good exercise to consider, because if you do too many things at the same time, you become the jack of all trades and the master of none. Right? But so just generally speaking, I'm saying when you're doing all those things at the same time, you're writing a letter to your wife, and you're cooking a cake, making a cake, and you're speaking on the phone to your best friend. None of those are particularly invested with your finest emotions, because they're just low energy, right? But nevertheless, you are correct. You could do all three at the same time, but you can only think one thought and only say one word and do an action at a time. So what we're going to learn in chapter 4 is the power of harnessing our garments. Now, just like physical garments, they can be donned and divested at will. You cannot replace your body. Oh, I don't like my kidney, I'm going to get a new kidney. I mean, technically, you probably could do that, but that's a major process to change your body. But to change I think they're talking about head transplants recently. You heard about this? Head transplants. Can you imagine getting a head transplant?
That's why we come to Chabad to get,
Right.
get that.
But you can't change your body, at least not yet. But to change your garments, you can easily do. 5 minutes ago, you might have been steeped in selfish, narcissistic behavior. And with the flip of a switch, you can become kind. It's your choice. You have self-determination on which garment you want to wear and which one you want to divest. You can wear nothing, by the way. You can just not talk. You can just not act. Can you not think? Impossible. Impossible to stop thinking. This pursuit of Eastern religions to reach some form of meditation where you're thinking about nothing is actually Kabbalistically unattainable. Because it's three different garments: thought, speech, and action. Thought is the closest to our soul. It's like you might want to call it like undergarments that maybe you don't take off. Action would be more like an outer coat that you wear when I'm outside. And speech may be more like maybe a shirt that you wear, not always. You know what I mean? So you can't divest of your thought, which is very, very concerning, because if you're not thinking positive thoughts, guess what happens? Negative thoughts. If you're not thinking conscious thoughts, you're thinking unconscious thoughts, and that could get ugly. So there's a lot to talk about this fascinating world of the garments of the soul. It's, again, so just to summarize, garments of the soul, we've identified them today at the beginning of chapter 4. We've identified that they exist. So now we know that our two souls need to manifest through one of the three or all of the three garments. How they manifest is your choice. You decide which soul is going to be manifest. And we really can relate to this. We talk about emotions and intellect. It's a little abstract. But you talk about words, actions, thoughts, this we can all relate to. Right? So that's easy. Now we made a bridge now to our souls, from real reality today to our souls. Okay, so I get it. I see that bridge. And we learned that what we're going to learn is that those garments are supremely powerful. They're extremely powerful. What we're going to, just a quick spoiler here, is that the godly soul can never become one with Hashem. Even though it's a piece of Hashem, it can never actually become one with Hashem. But through...
What do you mean become one?
We'll talk about it more. I'm giving you a little spoiler. But through thought, speech, and action, you can actually become one with Hashem. You can experience the highest human achievement I want you to think about this for a moment. What is your greatest aspiration of a human being? To make a lot of money? To buy a lot of houses? What is the highest human achievement? Let's just talk about this. To invent something super cool, like a self-driving car. I mean, that's nice, you know. Is it to invent cell phones? Like
Be fruitful and multiply.
that's a good one. To be fruitful and multiply, to have kids.
Mhm.
I've been to many people's deathbeds, and nobody's ever told me that the greatest achievement is their golf swing, you know. But they always tell me about their kids. But what we're going to learn in chapter 4 is that the greatest human achievement, and this is going to develop into chapter 5, the greatest human achievement capable of a human being is to go home, is to be united as one with your creator upon this earth. And that happens through your choices. It's not because of who you are.
You're not talking about death either, are you?
I'm not talking about death.
Going home.
Right. By the way, what happens in death is a product of life. The place you reach in heaven is just a score of your achievements upon this earth. Intimacy with God happens in this world. I mean, that's a big topic to talk about. But just in closing, I'd say that the highest human achievement is to become one with the divine. Because whatever achievement you could possibly make, whether it's in health, wealth, success, prosperity, innovation, technology, power, influence, all of that has one thing in common. It's all human experience. But you can actually break out the glass ceiling of the human experience and become divine. From creation, you can become one with the creator. And that happens through your garments. You can't do that through the body of your soul. Through the corpus of your soul, you can achieve that only through the garments, which is this incredible novelty, this incredible counterintuitive chidush novelty, which we learn in chapter 4. So for suffice it to say for now, to summarize what we've learned today that we have garments to our soul. We learned what they are, thought, speech, and action. And we've learned so far, again, this is all by way of introduction, that they are extremely powerful and very influential upon the state of our soul. Just like the physical clothes that you wear tremendously influence your state of mind and your mood. You know, could you sign a $10 million business deal if you've got holes in your socks? I don't think so.
Warren Buffett could.
He does. Oh yeah, he doesn't want to spend the money on the socks.
I don't think so.
Okay, interesting.
Always drove a very used car and things like
That's
that.
interesting.
He drove
Okay.
an Oldsmobile for years.
Yeah.
the whole
That's interesting.
Oldsmobile.
So, but remember the influence that physical garments have upon your physical body. Your soul garments have that power over your soul as well. Game the system, use it to your advantage. You want to become a mensch, act like a mensch. You want to become holy, act holy. You want to be a better Jew, don't just talk about it. Don't tell the rabbi how religious you are in your heart. Lay tefillin, give tzedakah, learn some Torah, thought, speech, and action. Fake it till you make it.
Is this all?
We are now off the record.
You want the record?